Kedves vendégeink! Jó estét kívánunk mindannyiuknak! Köszönjük, hogy itt vannak, hogy elfogadták a meghívást Milo Yiannopoulos előadására. Most fogadják szeretettel az est házigazdáját, Jeszenszky Zsoltot.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and anyone in between. That was a joke, by the way. I'd like to ask all of you a question tonight. Is the world in good shape? Are we doing okay? And this is not just a rhetorical question, please. Shout in, yes, no, whatever you think. I hear a lot of no's, hell no's. So, yes, we all like to complain, and all we hear from others is complaints, when actually people have never had it so good like we do. The entire European civilization, with its merits in the religion of Judaism and in the wisdom of Greek philosophy all coming together in Christianity, has done remarkable, incomparable accomplishments. Yes, incomparable, and this is a word for the liberals and multiculturalists to chew on, so I say it slowly. Incomparable. But it's about to be taken away. Not by war, not by plague, not by natural disaster or aliens from outer space, but by our own stupidity, or at least the stupidity of some among us. They call themselves liberals, although they don't have much in common with the truly great thinkers and the original principles of classical liberalism. Still, we shouldn't hate all of our liberal friends. A lot of them are well-meaning people, with good hearts led by their noses, by an elite group of influencers who are full of Nazi, fascist, oppressive, and dominating tendencies, and oftentimes they also embrace the economic stupidity of communism here and there. They want to make us feel guilty for what we have done instead of being proud of our achievements. They are forcing us into thinking that everything is and should be equal, that genital mutilation, honor killings, or forcing women to hide their faces in public are similar cultural accomplishments as the Colosseum in Rome, the separation of powers in government, or sending people to the moon. They go even further. They say we're actually inferior, that we're bad. And if we dare to think and say otherwise, we are immediately lynched, stigmatized as racist, or the flavor of the day expression, white supremacists. Yes, they are creating this thing called white guilt, and some of us are unfortunately stupid enough to fall for it. We should not. Thank you. We should embrace all cultures, races, and religions, but we should also be proud of our own. But not to be intimidated by the regressive left, many of us go into submission. We are all trying to be, oh, so nice, so Gutmensch. Some of us sincerely believe that the millions of illiterates invading Europe from all over the Middle East and North Africa are actual refugees, and all of them brain surgeons, IT experts, and we are all obliged to take them all in. No. Our liberal friends have their heads up in the clouds, or to be a little less nice and politically correct, they have their heads in their asses. Speaking of asses, by the way, when you came in, you should have found an email address on your seat. After our guest speaks tonight, we are going to do a short Q&A session, so if you have any questions for him, please send those to that email address with your name or your nickname or whatever in the subject line. If you haven't found that email address yet, look under your asses. It's there, okay? So back to our liberal friends. They are actually halfway right. Uncontrolled, illegal mass immigration is not a problem. It's a threat. But other problems, more theoretical, spiritual, political, are just as important, and they are paving the way for the destruction of Europe, both its physical form and its ideals. Atheism, the loss of faith, the mocking of Christianity, the denial of a greater divine force in our lives, and trying to put ourselves humans into its place. Traditions are being relativized, communities destroyed, our ways of life are being questioned. Family, nations, church, the belief in God, these are all deemed obsolete. And now, even our natural biological determinations are under attack. God is dead, but so are man and woman. We should all be one big happy family of smiling, consuming, diverse idiots who can decide their gender whenever they wish. All of this slowly but steadily weakens our immune system. There is no end to the self-destructing stupidity of today's politically correct, so-called liberal canon. Sometimes it is mind-boggling, sometimes infuriating, sometimes ridiculous. We could talk about it all night, but can we? And so we have come to what I think is our biggest concern these days, and one we can most certainly stop before it gets out of hand. The limiting, the curbing, the destruction of one of our greatest political achievements, free speech. This is a very nasty one. Undermining free speech comes in a very subtle, insidious, crooked way, in the form of political correctness, the fight against hate speech, and so on. From Facebook to Google, the most important platforms of mass media and communication are censoring right-of-center views, while their cronies in the world are crying their fake liberal tears about the freedom of the press in places like Hungary. They simply cannot stand that pockets of resistance are popping up everywhere in the battle for free thinking and free speech, in a war that we have unnoticeably slid into, the cultural war. And the right was almost beaten in this war, waking up in the last minute. Andrew Breitbart wisely said, "Politics is downstream from culture." Experiences in culture, and not just high culture, but culture, popular culture in general, the everyday thinking of people is what determines their political leanings. And the left knew this very well since 1968. They have taken the world of academia, of Hollywood, so those under 30 or 40, especially if they have studied at universities or work at multinational companies, have been seriously brainwashed already, with all sorts of craziness advocated by the leftists in power today. Let's see, there's socialism, genderism, safe spaces, trigger warnings, white guilt, there's a lot. Oh, and the relativization of Islam. Notice how I didn't say radical Islam, and this is another bone for the liberals out there. Radical Islam is Islam, unless, of course, it goes through its reforms and modernization, hopeful signs of which can actually be seen lately since Donald Trump's historic recent visit to the Middle East. But there's a long way to go, and that's a very long story to talk about tonight. As you all probably know, I have many arguments with my father. He keeps saying, "Oh, don't worry, the madness will go away." I wonder if Marie Antoinette thought that the Jacobin madness would just go away until she got her head chopped off. Or if Russian Tsar Nicholas Romanov thought that the Bolsheviks were just a passing phase until he got his whole family killed. Or if the Jews thought that Hitler and Nazism would just go away. Well, millions of them ended up in gas chambers, so it didn't. No, madness never just goes away. We need people, real enemies of the madness, not fake opponents, like the fellow travelers in their comfortable positions, part of the charade, very modest and well-spoken in their bow ties, who call themselves legacy conservatives. We call them cucks. Thank you. They are appeasing liberals wherever they can, and in return, the left labels them as good conservatives. As I said, the right is late, but finally woken up. We demand free speech and free thought. As Gavin McInnes wonderfully said a few weeks ago in London, we reserve the right to laugh, to be stupid, rude, and arrogant, to wear ridiculous Hawaiian shirts, to fart. Don't worry, I'm not demonstrating that one. Because that's who we are as human beings. We are fighting dictatorship, whether it's the Jacobin, the Bolshevik, the fascist, or the politically correct liberal Nazi dictatorship. We need to stop this one right now before it gets as bad as the first three. It's not just going to go away. Those didn't. Tonight, we have someone in the front lines of cultural war who definitely is not a legacy conservative. He's a kind of cutting-edge libertarian, and he calls himself a free speech fundamentalist. I could not agree more. He is fighting to stop the madness. I said we need people like Donald Trump, like Viktor Orban, like Andrew Breitbart, Steve Bannon, Jordan Peterson, like Candace Owens or Gavin McInnes, and with the modesty only paralleled by our guest speaker tonight, we need people like myself. But most of all, right now on stage, we need people like Milo Yiannopoulos.
Sort of rhythmic clapping makes me think of Catholic school. Wasn't an entirely happy experience for me, as some of you may have read in the press. The devil is real, and he lies. And his name is Soros Gerich. Thank you. I practiced that for an hour. How did I do? Was that okay? Soros Gerich. More about that odious gargoyle later. Now, I'm told that Hungarians spend most of their time talking about paprika and depression. I don't know a lot about spices. And looking like this, it's very difficult to stay sad for very long about anything. But I do know about one particular subject that is affecting Hungary at the moment, and that is Western civilization. The death of it, more specifically. It's my pleasure to welcome you this evening. Thank you so much for coming to see me. I understand that I think we had sort of 500 people in here, which is a very small crowd by my usual standards. But I understand that 1,000 people signed up within 48 hours, and we just couldn't fit them in. I said standing room only, and they said, no, we don't do that in Hungary. So thank you for coming, and congratulations on being some of the lucky few who made it in this evening. And thank you also to the organizers of this event. They have been wonderful, flying me over, and it's been very beautiful. Now, I'm happy to be in Budapest for a number of reasons. You have great caves. The caves are good. I know it's not quite the right country, but I've always been a fan of Vlad the Impaler. Just over the border. Always been a fan of being impaled. No need to be rude. But we have more in common than you might think. I, like Hungary, am one of the most lied about entities in Western civilization. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about why your enemies lie about you so much, how to beat them, and why they're saying the things about you that they are. Hungary's become one of the world's hottest cultural battlegrounds, and it's become a battleground between the globalists and the nationalists, between the social justice warriors and normal people, between feminists and the evidence-based universe. And this is a war that finds sensible, decent, good people running either for or away from the front lines, depending on their levels of courage. But the real thing that we have in common, Hungary and I, is fear. The left's really, really afraid of us. The progressive left, the social justice warriors, the globalists, the EU, all those American journalists who are always so mean about you. Very mean. Do you read the New Republic? Do you know what that is? They say you're going to hasten the end of the EU single-handed. Well, I'm not going to compliment you that strongly. But they say many of the same things about you they say about me, and they say it because they're afraid. They say it because they're worried about what you might achieve if you do the things that you say you might do. Now, America, where I live, is always going to be a country of enormous importance in the culture war. But Americans are concerned, they're consumed by things like freedom, democracy, property rights, capitalism, the rule of law, all good shit, by the way, good stuff. But what Americans sometimes lack is an appreciation of faith and culture. And the real reason that the left hates you and me so much is our faith. It isn't a controversial, or at least it shouldn't be a controversial statement to say that the greatest threat to human civilization, the greatest threat to the flourishing of human well-being, the greatest threat to Western civilization, greatest threat to Europe is Islam. Not radical Islam, not terrorism, not political Islam, but mainstream Muslim society. 100 million people or more live in countries in which I could be murdered for my, not just sexual choices, though I have many sexual choices. My husband is here today, and I won't point him out because I don't want him photographed, I don't want him to be assassinated. But were we to live in a dozen countries in the world, were we to live where over 100 million people live, we wouldn't be killed by homophobes, we would be murdered by the state for who we are. Now, as a Catholic, I well understand that there is some tension between my faith and my urges. But you know what? That's between me and her. Oh, come on, it's obviously a woman. No man would be such a vindictive bastard. The mere fact of being a homosexual or of being a woman is enough to warrant, to invite systematic persecution in much of the world. People don't realize how good they have it in Europe, how good they have it in America, how good they have it in the West. And our national governments, the EU, seem intent on mollycoddling and pandering to what basically boils down to a murderous faux medieval death cult determined to enslave all of us into habits that run entirely contrary to human nature. I want to talk to you a little bit about that today. Now, if you go back a few decades, Hungary did not have great support among ordinary Americans. Ordinary Americans probably never have heard of it, to be honest. But even Americans who reject Trump, who did not vote for the current president and reject nationalism, seem to agree with their influence. For instance, the New Republic says you're going to bring the EU crashing down, as I mentioned earlier. Viktor Orban has emerged as a sort of international icon. Now, you may not perceive this from this centrally placed, landlocked, strategically important, and extraordinarily historically rich country. But you seem to be thrust onto the front lines of history and culture remarkably regularly. This seems to be Hungary's curse and its promise. More often than perhaps you'd like, you seem to become one of the pivotal countries in the evolution of Western civilization. It's happening again. It's come to you again. It's here now again. And part of the reason for that, part of the reason that you are so important, is a sort of collapse of confidence in Christianity. It's a collapse of confidence in faith. Because Americans talk a lot, as I said, about freedom and democracy and capitalism and all the rest of it. But what really affects us is, if we walk down the street, how are we going to be treated? Are the buildings around us going to be blown up because they have idols on the walls and ISIS runs the town now? What are the values that shape how we live and who we love? And as I've come to know a bit more about Hungary, I've come to be more and more admiring of it. 21st century Christian democracy, which guarantees human dignity, freedom, and security, and protects the equal rights of men and women, the model of the traditional family, puts the brakes on anti-Semitism, protects our shared Western culture, and provides opportunity for the maintenance and development of our nation. That's an Orban quote, by the way. This is powerful stuff, and it's the only way in which Europe can proceed and succeed. Simple truths are now revolutionary in the modern media ecosystem. It has become hateful and bigoted to say that you think the West is the best. Well, the West is the best. And Hungary is one of the highest and most perfect examples of what Western civilization is capable of. It is a beautiful place. And just seeing a little bit of Budapest, this is a country of which you should have no shame in being enormously proud. It is a pivotal, historic, beautiful nation. And thanks to the current... I'm not just flattering you, by the way. There are speakers who will go to every country, and every single country they go to, like, oh my God, I love you. Not me. No. If I went to Sweden, I'd say, you fucking suck. But Hungary has evolved, has emerged as a sort of robust, fierce, brave, renegade nation on the front lines of Europe. Perhaps as a result of your really shitty 20th century. I mean, you know, it sucked for you guys. But you've emerged with some kind of fortitude, some kind of strength that nobody, I think, saw coming. You're able to weather the storms of the opinions of international journalists. You're able to ignore lunacy from the European Union. You're able to express your views, and you're able to say, you know what, that's actually not best for Hungary, so maybe we won't. Cast your eye at Germany, millions of working-class Syrian immigrants. Nobody really knows how many. Anyone who tries to tell you that they do know is a liar. And you have spectacles such as female doctors being spat at in emergency departments by Syrian migrants who refuse to be treated by women. Migrant centers set up to help. This is an example of sort of Western largesse. Set up to help the underprivileged, burned down because our new friends from the Middle East don't like the food. You have excused yourself from these indignities, and for that, I congratulate you. Now, I wasn't intending to praise China in this speech, but some of you may have seen recent news. China has opened camps. Now, look, I know they have a bad history in Europe, but let's keep an open mind. Because these camps they're like centre parks. You know what that is? You've been to Britain, you've been to centre parks, sort of lakes, houses, restaurants. Well, they're like that, but for Muslims. And And the diet is bacon and beer. If you want to eat, you have to eat pork. And if you want to drink, you have to drink alcohol. How awful. And this, I know that I ought to be horrified by this, and Hungarians know better than anybody else about the horrors that can ensue under communism, but Islam isn't like other religions. It's not just some innocent Abrahamic faith. It is a prescriptive political ideology that requires the oppression of women and the murder of homosexuals, and it has no place in Europe. None. And when you look around to the insanity that surrounds you in Europe, it's easy to become victim of a sort of Stockholm syndrome. Where you're surrounded by so much crazy that it starts to feel normal. The things that Angela Merkel says after 20 years, they almost make sense. Well, they don't make sense. There is no reason, there is no need, there is no compulsion, there is no argument for the importation of people whose values are not just antithetical to ours, but whose culture is dedicated to our annihilation. You are under no obligation to take immigrants from a society that wants you dead. So stop feeling bad about it, and if you don't feel bad about it, don't get tempted to feel guilty. Donald Trump, who I know has a sort of mixed reputation in Europe, has moved the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Palestinians responded, as terrorists always do, with temper tantrums and being really crap at war. 60-0. But it shouldn't be a controversial thing for Western countries and our friends in the Middle East to stand up for our values, to stand up for the things that make the West free and great and fair. In describing the attack on Israel and the military's defense of her borders, Ambassador Friedman, who's the US ambassador to Israel, said, "No nation in the world allows foreigners to storm its border, period." Perhaps he hasn't noticed what's been going on in Europe recently. Sweden, Germany. These countries have become occupied. And they've become occupied because conservatives are nice. We're good people, we're gentle, we're sweet, we're loving. And we have this really fucking dumb misconception of our religion that suggests that, well, we should turn the other cheek and be kind. No, it is time for war because we are under attack. For water, I've been having some of your Hungarian schnapps. It's very nice, but it's very drying. It's better. The European Union's response, of course, to an incursion. Well, there's no way to do it elegantly. I mean, it's a sort of thing. There's no way it fits here. The Europeans' response to what is unarguably an incursion, a cultural incursion, hasn't been a sort of forceful rejection of a people in a society who want us eradicated. It has been, oh, do please come in and have some public services. Worse than that, much worse than that. Worse than Merkel. Such a thing is imaginable. That thing she does, that... No, they call it the power diamond, but I know what it is. It's a vagina. It's like lesbian power. There's nothing in the world lesbians haven't ruined, including the gay lobby, the media, academia, and the European Union. But Europe has not just turned a blind eye to this, it's actually been actively complicit. In my own home country, to which I don't return because I don't speak Arabic, in my own home country, the police have given up investigating systematic, generational, community-wide, organized gang rape of innocent young girls because they don't want to be seen as racist. And this isn't funny, actually. Rotherham, I think it was 1,400 girls. Telford, a similar number. Women who are being abused, raped, in some cases gang raped, brainwashed, enslaved by any sensible definition of the term, by familial rape gangs, all of whom share one particular thing in common. No prizes for guessing. But the police knew about it and did nothing for decades because of political correctness. And political correctness is a sort of cancer even worse than George Soros. I realize that's a controversial claim to make in a room like this. He, of course, fuels and benefits from it in the various things that he funds. And by the way, as bad as you feel about George Soros, fuck you guys, because he does nothing that bad here versus the domestic terrorists he funds in the US. I mean, like, thank you for having the right opinion about him, but you have no idea how bad this guy really is. Let me tell you. Honestly. You use the Open Society Foundation, like, they'll break down borders, we love immigrants, blah, blah, blah. All of that is crap and stupid enough. But in America, I want to talk on a college campus, and they burn the town down. Professors take bike locks and smash innocent people in the face. Thank God Hungary has escaped that so far. The only reason I said fuck you is because you made him. One of yours. Then again, as a gay man, I'm torn. Jean, George. Every single day, Europe outdoes itself in showing insanity in the face of the threat of Islam. Some of these stories are almost impossible to believe. So the Nice truck attack, right? You know, someone like, those kids with the gold blankets. Do you want to know what Germany's response to that was? Do you know? Germany has introduced a program for Muslim refugees to help them become truck drivers. It's called Drive Into Your New Future. Makes a nice change from Drive Into the Infidels. For a proper perspective on this insanity, we do have to look, of course, as I mentioned, to China. Now, being forced to eat pork and drink alcohol in general, to do everything that Islam says is going to get you sent straight to hell. It's not a nice way to treat people, but then one thing that's not reported very much is that Islamic radicals are murdering hundreds of people in China, just like they are everywhere else. Blowing up an Israeli pizza restaurant full of teenagers to most well-adjusted people would be a cause for censure. For Muslims, it gets you one of the VIP booths in heaven. We can criticize China for these camps. As I said, Hungarians will know that communists tend to deal with problems using a slightly heavy hand. But Islam is not just an innocent religion. It's a prescriptive political ideology, and you know, we can be kind if we want, we can be generous, we can be charitable. We can say they don't know any better, but we cannot make the same excuses for the left wing in our own countries, on our own continent. We cannot make the same excuses for the European Union, for the Democrat Party, for Labour in the UK, for Angela Merkel. They do not deserve our excuses. They deserve our contempt and hatred. We're perfectly entitled to find these people loathsome. Now, it's tough to know whether our cultural cowardice is hilarious or horrifying to our enemies. Because if you're a terrorist, your job is to make people scared, right? Like you want to blow people up, you want to kill people, and you want to make them afraid. So you're sort of like, imagine you're an ISIS or like, you know, Osama bin Laden before he killed him. You blow people up, and you turn on the TV, and you expect people like, oh! And what actually happens is you see newsreaders saying, actually, Islam's a religion of peace. Must be so annoying. I mean, it's bad enough the Chinese camps, like forcing them to eat bacon and drink beer, but what we do to them is far worse. We rob them of the ability to actually terrify people by pretending that, by pretending that what they're doing is some weird aberration rather than actually what it is in fact, which is merely following the prescriptions of their religion to the letter. CNN's Jake Tapper responds to terrorist incidents by saying, Allahu Akbar. It's shouted at beautiful moments. No wonder Osama was so mad. It was Al-Qaeda trying to establish its terrorist street cred with acts of unprecedented savagery. And what do? Turn the other cheek, declare Islam a religion of peace, and take in millions of Syrian migrants. It's almost funny. Now, the reaction of the West to the horrors of Islam is enough to make even the most grizzled jihadis flesh crawl, but it isn't just immigration and Islam that globalists are attacking Hungary over. You've had harsh criticism of both Orban and Hungary on the topic of freedom of the press. They say that you and dear Uncle Victor, I guess a special Uncle Victor, they say that he's hostile to press freedom. That was all I had to say on that subject. No. We in our movement, we who believe in free speech, national borders, civic pride, we who believe that the nation state is the only organizing principle that really ensures the continued success and flourishing of humanity. We who reject the excesses of modern feminism, we reject the European Union, we reject socialism, we reject Soros Georg. We who do these things, we will protect the press when there is a press worth protecting. You're very lucky in Hungary. Very lucky. I mean, everyone I've been in, I don't know whether I've been protected, I've been insulated from the left-wing press on this trip. But everyone I've been interviewed by today so far seems to understand what I'm getting at. But the media elsewhere, and this is why I love you guys so much, because you don't seem to be quite so stuffed by an aggressive, violent, activist left and by a left-wing media. The media elsewhere has become nothing more than a branch of far-left activism masquerading as an institution that speaks truth to power. These people are worthy of nothing but contempt. These people are worthy of nothing but your loathing and your hatred. When they once again rediscover their commitment to speaking the truth, then perhaps we'll refocus on their right to say whatever they want about whoever they want. But until then, how about we spend some time talking about how the press covers up for the appalling lies and crimes of the establishment left wing that seems intent on destroying the beautiful and brilliant civilization that we have built here in the West. The fourth estate, in the form of newspapers and TV stations and all the rest of it, seems more like a globalist puppet than a roguish gadfly. And I want to quote a great Hungarian thinker, Professor Thomas Molnar, about what the media has become. And he said in 1994, around 1960, the power of the media was not yet what it is today. The fourth estate, the class above decency and laws, that's how he described it. Hardly anybody suspected that the media would soon become more than a new Caesar, a demiurge, creating its own world, the events therein, the prefabricated comments, counter-comments, and silence. Where was the dominant culture-defining category, I asked myself, when in the East communist regime systematically destroyed the traditional structure, and in the West a fiscal and cultural bulldozer leveled the social landscape to uniformity? The more I saw of universities and campuses, publishers and journals, newspapers and television, the creation, not the description, but the creation of public opinion, of policies and their outcome, the less I believed in the existence of the freedom of expression, where it really mattered for the intellectual and professional establishment. For the time being, I saw more of it in Europe than in America. Over there, institutions still stood guard over certain freedoms. Well, that wasn't a recent comment, that was 1994, and things are much, much worse since then. We will defend the press when there's a press worth defending. What we have now throughout Europe and America is a network of entitled crybabies pretending to be outraged and offended because we used the wrong transgender pronoun, ignoring the fact that our civilization is crumbling beneath our feet. And if they won't do the job of defending it, we will do it for them. And if they want to squeal about how mean Donald Trump is about the press, and how mean Viktor Orban is about the press, and about the horrible, hostile environment for reporters, we didn't do that to them. They did it to them. Christians in the West to this day have a basic ignorance about Islam. And many of the people in this hall, the ones who aren't applauding towards the back, I do notice, like I'm paying attention, have a sort of basic misunderstanding about Islam. They think, well, these people are basically good. I mean, they're trying to live a good life. They follow religion. I mean, religions are all sort of basically the same. They're not the same. And the single greatest failing of the media, of our politicians, of our academic establishments, of our establishments in general, the greatest failing of all of them for the last 3 decades has been their failure to acknowledge and admit that there is something fundamentally different about the barbarians at the gate. They're not just a slightly different religion. They belong to a political, prescriptive, and particular historical narrative that doesn't just encourage, but demands the subjugation of the rest of us. Islam and Christianity are not similar. They have nothing in common besides the bits of the Bible that Islam plagiarized. You can compare them yourself. It's very embarrassing for them. The final, unalterable, and perfect word of God. Isn't that from... polygamy? Now, I know some men in the audience are going to be thinking, what's so bad about that? But we know that the best foundational principle for wealth and happiness and success and cohesive civilizations is a man and a woman and a child in a nuclear arrangement. Islam rejects this. Islam also rejects basic reason. I mean, Christians are often ridiculed because, you know, sort of like, oh, well, weren't you kind of like against Galileo and blah, blah, blah. The whole purpose, the whole origin of the study of science in the West came from the church. It was the church who said, the world is fascinating and brilliant and interesting and remarkable, and God made it, so we should find out how it works, because it's awesome. Islam takes a different view. It throws out logic and reason and math, and it replaces it with whatever Allah says. So Muslims specifically say that Allah can make 2 + 2 = 5 if he wants to. But 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5. And if you think that it does, you can't build rockets and nuclear reactors. Which is why no one in the Middle East ever has. They just buy ours. As the modern secular state becomes increasingly totalitarian, it begins to look upon the family as a rival to its own power. Which is why you'll find the left popping up, pushing trans bullshit, trying to tell women that it's fine to not have kids and just, you go, girl, with the inevitable result that there's a generation of absolutely fucking miserable 35-year-old women who hate their jobs, hate their life, hate their friends, hate their flat, hate their cat, hate their cardigans, and just wish they'd had babies. Like all totalitarian systems, like feminism, thank you. Like all totalitarian systems, Islam requires you to believe things that aren't true. Because if you can make someone say they believe something that they know isn't true, you've exercised your dominion over them. You've proven that you can make them do anything. If you can make newspaper journalists who know that it isn't true say there's a terrible wage gap, women are paid 79 cents to the dollar, they're not. There's an epidemic of rape on American college campuses, there isn't. If you can make people say they believe things that they instinctively know aren't true, you're exercising, you're demonstrating your dominion over them. And Islam does the same thing. It works like every other conspiracy theory. It makes you say things you know aren't true, like 2 + 2 = 5. Now, there is a little glimmer of hope. Christianity and Islam, of course, couldn't be more different. But just saying so has got me ejected from all kinds of polite society. I don't get invited to parties anymore. Imagine me winning an award for something. No. Barely allowed in government buildings in most of Europe. But there's a ray of hope. And it might be this country. Because there's a reason I took a 22-hour flight here. It wasn't fun. I live in Miami. Like, oh yeah, let's go to Budapest, that sounds fun. It's hell. I mean, it's nice, I'm here now, it's nice now. It wasn't nice yesterday. But we see in you what the rest of us could be like if only we had the courage. And we see in you a country that, I mean, in Budapest, 30% of people report themselves as being Catholic, and the rest are just different kinds of Christian. That's amazing. That doesn't happen in modern, cosmopolitan, wealthy European cities. People are like, oh, no. That's awesome. That's fabulous. Look around yourself. Look at the palace. Look at the... You have been at the center of so many incredible moments in history. And I'm here today to tell you that you're about to be at the center of another one. You're about to be the vanguard in the defense of Western civilization. You are about to become, once again, as you have been so often in the past, the front lines in the battle for freedom. You have suffered, this country has suffered enormously in the past. But country has suffered enormously in the past, but I think that's given you the resolve you need. Now, I'm not entirely sure. I am Catholic, and I'll deal with the gay thing with her, but damn sight more Catholic than the Pope. I recognize and I see in you a little glimmer, a shard, a bright beacon of what tomorrow could look like. And we really need you. We really, really need you. Look at Germany. What is this, sort of dyke dictatorship? Imagine a country so cuckolded and demasculated that they keep re-electing this. France has lost its way. We've now got a president who doesn't object when Donald Trump is like picking dandruff off his shoulder. And the guy's like, thanks. We believe in you guys, though. What Christianity liked, the kind of Christianity that you saw on the royal wedding recently, that ridiculous preacher saying, we're like, yeah, love, peace, fabulousness. Love is nothing without justice. Love is nothing without the rule of law. And if you truly love the civilization you have built, if you truly love each other, if you truly love yourselves, you know what it takes to protect that. Anybody who has a family, anybody who has children knows that they would hurl themselves on a fire, thrust themselves before weaponry, do anything it took to protect those children. Well, Hungary now, I'm sorry to say, has been thrust into the role of father of Europe. When Trump was running for office, I said, make America great again is okay, but what you really should do is make America hate again. Not because I'm a hateful person. I mean, there are some things that are worthy of hatred, veganism. But we should hate this faux medieval barbarism that we're being encouraged to accept. We should hate the oppression of women. We should hate grooming gangs. We should hate trucks becoming weapons in the streets of France. We should hate the inability for people in Western Europe to celebrate the birth of Christ without fear or somebody saying, do you know what, that might be a bit offensive. Can we just say happy holidays? Fuck off! No! Merry bloody Christmas. But above all, we should hate the people who excuse those horrors. We should hate social justice warriors. We should hate the progressive left. We should hate the vast globalist architecture that preaches diversity and tolerance whilst in fact stoking discord. We should hate Angela Merkel. We should hate the faceless, nameless bureaucrats of the EU. And yes, we should hate Soros György. I messed up that last time, but I got the first two really good, really well. Now, I know you're ashamed that he is Hungary's most highest profile export. So I'm not going to go on about him. But these things are all worthy of your hatred, of your contempt. These days, our churches are more concerned with climate change than with God. Mindless platitudes about love and coexistence. Nothing about God, Jesus, and the devil. But I started this by telling you that there is a devil. And that devil is... he lives in those moments where Christians think that because we're encouraged to be nice, it means we have to be pushovers. He lives in those moments where because we have to be virtuous, we think we have to turn a blind eye to horror. And he lives in those moments where, for the sake of being politically correct, we excuse the suffering of innocence. And that is happening all over Europe. No matter how difficult it seems, and no matter how terrible the rest of Europe says you are, Hungary must stay its course. Support Viktor Orban. Support the men like him. Your faith, your country, and your culture depend on it. And aside from anything else, you're winning. You are beating Soros. Viktor Orban is the only guy to ever stand up against him and win. You practically expelled him from the country. You don't realize how fucking amazing that is. Viktor Orban stood up and said, not now, not Hungary, not ever. Some of you will have read Roald Dahl, that book, The Twits. You know the book, The Twits? He starts it off by saying if you have beautiful thoughts, they'll show on the face, even if you don't have beautiful features. And if you have ugly, dark, hideous thoughts, they will manifest themselves in your outward appearance. George Soros. Here in Hungary, you have experienced the consequences of resisting the globalist assault. You have been wrongly accused of anti-Semitism, wrongly accused of all kinds of bigotries and hatefulnesses. But it is not Viktor Orban or the Hungarian people who are at fault here. Who else besides Viktor Orban would tell the truth, a simple truth? That the reason that Jews in some German towns are advised not to wear religious garments is not some mysterious uprising of the far-right white nationalist anti-Semitism. It's Muslims. They just don't like Jews very much. And you just, like, said 1 million of them come live here. It's not a mystery. And yet no one's able to say it. George Orwell said in Times of Universal Deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Well, Hungary as a country is spearheading that revolution. You should be very proud of yourselves. You should be very happy. The left, while enjoying the claim of moral virtue, which is what justifies their violence, has revealed in the last decade they possess no virtue at all. Conservatives, libertarians, and Christians, subject to ritual public humiliation by the dishonorable and the degenerate, are experiencing something of a renaissance. I mean, we had one already, unlike the Muslim world, and now we're going to have another one. And this new one is going to secure our position as free, decent people who don't believe that subjugation to the will of Allah is the way that we should live. The pleasure taken in our routine torture by journalists, by university professors and celebrities is a sign that humanity has been drained from the modern left. But we should try to treat our opponents with some degree of humility and humanity, even if they don't do it to us. Since Robespierre, the left has used violence when its arguments fail, and its arguments always fail. But they'd better teach themselves to rein that in, because countries like Hungary are proving that it's not going to work forever. We're going to find a way to forgive them. I don't know how yet, but we are. The collapse into moral nihilism is only going to make them unhappy. We're going to make them miserable. We're not going to allow them any longer to make us hurt like they are hurting. There's something indomitable, something unbeatable in the human spirit, and I see it in Hungary. It requires freedom as a condition of happiness. And so long as we are not allowed to say by the powers that be in Europe that we believe in God and in freedom and in justice and in peace and all of the things that have made our countries beautiful and wonderful and genuinely tolerant, so long as that obtains, we don't have freedom of speech. Hungary is doing a nice job telling everybody else to go fuck themselves. You are the vanguard, you are the front lines, although you may not have realized it before this evening, of the fight for Western civilization and the fight for freedom of expression, the right of every person to be, do, and say whatever they want. Don't mess it up. Thank you very much.
Milo.
Thank you.
There's a Q&A that we need to do.
Oh, there is?
Remember?
Where do I go? Do I stand
Just
here?
stay here.
Oh, perfect.
We'll hang out here.
Disrobe again.
So we promised these people that they could ask you a couple of questions.
Yes.
And they have sent them via email.
Well,
so
unlike James Comey, the FBI director, so responsible for attempting to tear down Donald Trump's reputation, he has questions in a bucket on his book tour that his team will kind of like sift through and make sure they're not too offensive and not too difficult. I'm happy to answer anything. So
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, we've got quite an intellectual lot here. So.
Honestly, this fucking schnapps. It was really nice, but I'm never going to have that before a speech again. Okay.
Yeah, so we've got a really intellectual, deep thinking, a lot of people here, and we have some really great...
That wasn't clear from the applause.
Right. Well, we got some really great, thorough questions, so let me read a couple of those. This one comes from Tamás Török. Can we see you in the audience somewhere? Tamás, where are you? There you are. Okay, like I said, a very deep and intellectual crowd. So, do you think Mr. Trump or Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is more handsome?
Oh, God.
Thank you, Tamás. I think that was the best question of tonight. Seriously.
When I first christened Trump Daddy, to the consternation and fury of the left-wing press, and the nickname has stuck, which I'm very happy about. When I first christened him Daddy, it wasn't because he was beautiful, but rather because he provoked, I think, in many of us, the same feelings that we have towards our own fathers, which is sometimes they make us cringe, sometimes they embarrass us, but ultimately we know they have our best interests at heart, and they can do the things that nobody else can do, especially not Mom. I have to go with Trump. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We understand.
No, look. Uncle Victor.
Well, just to...
Sadly, I'm married now, but under other circumstances, maybe after a particularly large quantity of schnapps. Okay. No, it's only because he's the wrong race for me. He's a very handsome man.
Well, I totally understand you, and if you like the shirt, you would probably love the shoe. That's about as good as it gets.
Oh, they're lovely. They're lovely.
So I'm with you on that. But
fishing for compliments is it? No.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Speaking of Trump, and this is a little more serious now. You spoke about George Soros and how he undermined.
And I managed to pronounce his name correctly at least twice.
Which we congratulate you on.
Thank you.
Again. He's undermining American society, the belief in the police, everything.
Yes.
And this is a very good question from Krzysztof, actually, about Trump. Where are you, Krzysztof? There you are. Thank you. Our Prime Minister has been really vocal about his opposition to George Soros. The same Mr. Soros who has been actively trying to undermine Donald Trump's presidency with the network of organizations funded by him. Yet, President Trump, who is not known to shy away from calling out his enemies, hasn't even ever mentioned Mr. Soros in his speeches or tweets. Why do you think the president seemingly ignores the billionaire philanthropist?
You're right,
good
aren't
question.
you?
Yeah.
I'd never thought of that.
Me neither, but this guy has. Let's give him a hand.
Well, I don't know what the reason is, but I'll be sure to write to him and tell him to correct it. I probably just chaos and confusion rather than strategy. I happen to know for a fact that Donald Trump is aware of some of the where the funding comes for some of these domestic terrorist organizations. I don't know the answer to that. That's a really good question. Well, I think that's another example in which Donald Trump is not perfect. I don't know. I don't know, but I do happen to know from speaking to his intimates that he's obviously aware of this stuff. I don't have an answer for you, but I'll try to get one.
And when you come back here, which you will, we hope.
I would love to.
You will have the answer for us.
There's the other 700 people who couldn't get in this evening, and I have to come and talk to them.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Okay, now we got a couple of questions that are kind of connected, and they're really good. One of them says, currently I'm dating a feminist liberal girl. Wow. I mean, I love her and she's so nice, but we have totally different views about the world. Do you have any advice? How should I deal with her when it comes to arguing? This is from Balázs. Balázs, where are you? There you are, thank you. And another question.
Yes.
We wonder who the girl is, by the way.
Well, you will not be happy with this woman, and I don't I do not believe in rewarding failure. And if a woman has come to the conclusion that everything that is wrong in her life is a result of the patriarchy, rather than her own bad life decisions, I don't believe in rewarding that sort of lunacy either. She's going to bring the same degree of hysteria and lack of rational understanding to her relationship as she's brought to her politics. She's going to make your life miserable and hellish. And I think the best way to beat feminism is to demonstrate to women that it is the only surefire way of ending up miserable and alone.
Well,
dump her.
Our friend has some really, really good prospects here in his love life, doesn't he? Poor guy. Okay, if it's not a loving relationship, but maybe a family or friends, this is a good one too, and actually there's two of them. My question is, how would you advise young millennials to fight for free speech and fight against the current cultural shift when the moment you associate yourself with differing beliefs to the mainstream openly, you are doomed in the eyes of everyone who doesn't have a brain, which is most of the media? Mm-hmm. Also, I have noticed that many of my peers are starting to hold beliefs similar to the 21st century liberals. Is there any efficient way to open up their eyes to this madness? This is from Gunther. Gunther, where are you? I can't see you. Gunther.
No, it's the lights are very bright.
Yeah,
I can't see anything.
They're horrible. And I need your advice. My mother is a feminist and one of the most closed-in persons I know. You are the best fighter.
That one is very simple. Matricide. Just kidding.
You're the best fighter of feminism.
Well, I mean, once they've had kids, I mean, like sort of counting the days after that. I mean, sort of watching the clock run out. I mean, once you've had the kids and they've grown up. I mean,
But seriously, this is a very good question by Fuck Jar Jar, so we don't know who that it really is, but a good one. This is a serious question. A lot of us have that problem, trying to talk with people, trying to get them out of their craziness, their stupidity. Do you have any advice for all of us in everyday life?
Yes. Apologies, timidity, none of these things work. You have to go on the offensive. And by that I mean be offensive. Public ritual humiliation is the best way to deal with feminists. Normally a picture will suffice of them. But if that fails, you can always bring up some of the things they believe in company over the dinner table, such as, my mother believes that women are paid 79 cents on the dollar. How do we all feel about that? She won't bring it up again. No, I mean, the left deals in ritual public humiliation and mockery and intimidation, all the rest of it. Those people who cannot be persuaded through reason and argument deserve to be intimidated as they would intimidate you if they had the chance. I'm not mean because I enjoy it. I mean, I do enjoy it, but I'm mean because it works, and I'm mean only in those instances when everything else has failed. And I think perhaps the left hates me particularly more than other conservative speakers and activists and authors because I'm prepared to fight fire with fire. Feminists don't traffic in reason, logic, and sincerity. They traffic in intimidation and conspiracy theory. That's the appropriate counter-response. It's the only appropriate response. Laughter. Laughter. Because what you have to understand is people become feminists in the first place to escape a sense of sort of, there's a sort of lack of security about the world around them. They want to sort of control other people's responses to them. They feel, broken. They want other people to feel broken too, blah, blah, blah. The only real way to respond to somebody who is not communicating with you from a place of integrity, decency, faith, or logic, but is instead coming at you from a place of pain, intimidation, slimy debate tactics, and emotion, is to respond with brutal ridicule. They fold quickly. And many of the people that I have experienced in my life, I've responded to not with reason but with ridicule, have realized the error of their ways very quickly. If you have a relative, or if you know somebody, or even perhaps have made the mistake of loving somebody left-wing, they can very often be snapped out of their ridiculous beliefs by the most cursory and silly sort of trivial ridicule, because they don't really know very much about what they believe. They sort of reflexively do it because everybody else is doing it, because they think that's the right thing, it's how to be nice, and it's how to get what they want. But there is no vast global conspiracy trying to make straight white men on top of everything. If there were, it would be particularly ineffective given the statistics about women going to college in the Western world and all the rest of it. If there is a patriarchy, it's really useless. The best way to deal with this kind of stupidity is just to laugh it off and ignore them, because you'll quickly find people come running back to common sense.
Well, I really feel sorry for those people who have these types of arguments with family members. I'm really glad that I don't.
I would, to be honest with you, I just ostracize them. You know, if you have an aunt or a mother or a sister who's decided she's going to be a radical feminist, just don't take her calls anymore. Because the only way you're going to persuade these people that they are untouchable by society as a result of the ridiculous things they believe is by making them untouchable. Just don't take their calls. Trust me. Removing yourself from their life is going to hurt them a lot more than trying to reason with them.
Okay, you said going on the offense is the best strategy. Well, let me go on the offense a little. And this comes from it's a good question from Mate about your relationship with Ben Shapiro. Where's Mate? Thank you.
That small person.
Why? He's saying we know it's strained to say the least. What is the origin of this feud, and
I don't really know.
What the fuck is going on between you and Ben? Come on.
I don't really know who she is, but I did hear once that she didn't like me because I was much hotter and more successful. I don't know. There's not really a feud. You know, Ben exists in that same nexus of people who were ferociously anti-Trump until he won, and then he flipped.
Well, better late than never.
No, I don't believe in following the money in a cynical, opportunistic fashion. I believe in
you think that's the case?
I believe
with him?
Believe in leading with decency and integrity. And trust me, I would have had I would have an even more profitable career if I, decided to be an opportunist. I like people who say what they actually believe rather than what they're paid to say, and that's my central problem with Ben.
Okay. Another pretty good question. Food for thought. It's from Benjo. Where are you, Benjo? Benjo. Well, you got to be here somewhere. You raised at least like 3 questions. I mean, I hope you haven't left. Just left us here with your questions.
It's hit and run.
Yeah, I guess. If in 100 years people in Europe aren't majority white, but at the same time love and share the Western Enlightenment values, would you say that is all right, or is being white still important and not just culture?
Oh, I don't give a flying fuck about skin color. What I care about is values and ideas. What I want is for people coming into Europe and entering European countries to share our values. I want them to join the countries, speak the language they move to, which is, the first basic requirement of indicating that you'd quite like to be a part of the society that you've asked to join, and then live like you actually want to be there. The increasingly segregated and radicalized Muslim contingents in Belgium and in the UK don't just resist British civilization, they actively militate against it, which is why they send so many fighters to ISIS, because they want to tear down Western civilization. I don't care what someone's skin color is. Those of you in the audience who follow me more closely than the others will know about my sexual proclivities. What I care about is what's in people's hearts. And if, for instance, the Indian immigrants who came over after the Second World War in Britain are in some respects kind of like better than the white working class Brits. They never get in trouble, they pay their taxes, they start businesses, you never see their names in the paper, but they're Sikhs and Hindus, they're not Muslims. The Muslims who came over are blowing things up and going to fight for ISIS. What I care about is not the hue of somebody's skin or their gender or their sexuality. What I care about is, do they want to leave me alone? Do they want to let me live how I want to live? Do they believe in small government? Are they Christian? Do they agree with me, the unarguable and totally irrefutable obvious truth that Western civilization is the high pinnacle of human society, that is the greatest achievement of our species to date, and that it should be protected and cherished and celebrated? And if somebody agrees with that, I don't care what they look like.
Yeah. But I mean, if let's just imagine the impossible for a second, like kind of like a thought experiment, like Schrödinger's cat or whatever. And let's pretend that all those people from the Middle East, North Africa, wherever, come here, they decide to integrate, they decide to embrace European values, and in 100 years, of course, with their fertility, much higher fertility rate, they are going to be the dominant tenants of Europe.
Some people might care. I don't care.
You don't mind? Okay.
I don't care. I mean, liberals in America, left-wingers in America, like to crow about what's called the browning of America. They love the fact that white people are going to be in the minority by 2050. I don't care. All I want is to like walk along the street with people who believe the same things that I do, because then I know I'm not in danger. Because I can go out to a nightclub safe in the knowledge that somebody's not going to show up with an AR-15 and kill me because some preacher said that the compassionate thing to do was murder all homosexuals. I just want to know that people respect me and believe the same things that I believe. I don't care about anything else, really.
Okay. Can I get a little more personal? I mean, not cuddling up and shit, but
you can hug. It's okay. I'm not afraid of a little cuddling.
No, of course not.
I noticed you've got closer since I said it was
I got to tell you this one. I wrote an article in December.
So it was a fine mane of hair, a very handsome man.
Oh, thank you so much. I got a compliment from Milo. Thank you. I got to tell you this one. When you were supposed
What does this mean, by the way? Because I feel like whenever I'm doing something in a country whose language I don't speak, I always feel like I'm being set up.
I will tell you.
It's like he's wearing a T-shirt saying "Neo-Nazis Unite" or something, you know. And I'm just like, I don't know.
I will tell you.
There's going to be some picture in the front cover of the paper the next day. I'm like, oh, not again.
Okay, so here's the deal. I'm asking you a bunch of questions.
What does it mean?
I'm asking you a bunch of questions.
Don't change the subject. What does it mean?
And in the end, you can ask.
What does it mean?
And in the end, you can ask me that one question, okay? And I will answer. I promise.
I promise.
But I got to tell you this one. When you were supposed to come here in January, and the whole thing was postponed, I wrote an article. Which had
I don't know anything about that. I'm not commenting.
Quite a run, and in that article I wrote that even though I am 100% heterosexual, you are the only person in the world that I would let kneel in front of me. And there's a friend of mine, Gabor, who just
thank you
picked you up at the airport, and I said he would even do the reverse position.
Well, surely that would be the preferable one for a heterosexual, because you could just pretend that it was somebody else, you know. Whereas for you, you got to. Man, head, I don't know.
Well, okay.
Well, I thank you for the compliment.
But I think
the answer's no. I get this a lot, and it's a funny thing. I call it milosexuality. It's a sort of strange little sort of spike of sexual deviance and degeneracy that occurs in freedom-loving populations. There's a certain sort of slice of straight white males in Western Europe for whom I'm the only time they'd ever go there. I take it as a great compliment.
And you should. Okay, here goes. You used to oppose it. How come you chose to get married as a gay man?
Okay, good question.
This is from Ildiko,
yes.
by the way. Where are you?
So I was...
There you are. Thank you.
I was against gay marriage, and I think I was slightly stupid. I am not so conceited that I believe that the church should change its views for my convenience. And I know that I have some work to do morally and spiritually on that particular subject. I do, however, think that I don't really think that the state should have any role in marriage at all. But if it's going to, because we have socialized healthcare and because there are all these other different things that the state has to sort of okay before you're allowed to do them, you know, like walking along the street, for instance. If the state is going to be such a pervasive feature of our lives, then I guess it has to have some role in recognizing marriages. And if it does that, you know, distinct from the religious dimension, I think it would be mean and stupid to deny people the right to express their love for one another. The two things I would say about this subject, and I'm still confused about it, as you can probably tell, but the two things I would say about it is, one, I do not believe in gay marriage without ironclad protections for religious freedom and freedom of religious conscience. If there is any risk whatsoever that any church might be compelled to perform a religious ceremony for two men against its own conscience, then it should not happen. Two, I didn't really believe that two men could love each other as I now have found love for myself, and I think that might have been where my original opinion was coming from. I didn't really realize that, you know, two guys could feel about one another the way that I now feel about my husband. So it sort of, when I experienced that and discovered that for myself in life, it seemed a bit ridiculous to withhold marriage. But I would never in a million years try to demand that any kind of religious figure perform the ceremony, because I'm I'm not so conceited, as I said, to expect the church to bend to my preferences. So the jury's out as far as what I think about that, but my position on it has softened as a result of life experience. As I say, the preeminent concern for me is freedom of religious conscience. What you don't want to happen is what happened in Ireland, in the UK, a few years ago, when the government passed a law saying that adoption agencies were not allowed to take the sexuality of prospective parents into account when assigning children. Well, the Catholic Church, unlike other kinds of Christianity, really believes what it says. And they had no option but to just close the Catholic adoption agencies. The effect on abandoned babies was catastrophic. I believe, despite my own sexual orientation, that the best chance for a child is with its own biological mother and father, and if that's not possible, with another man and woman who love each other. But the government was... If there's no other parents available, I'm not saying that two gay parents are going to be a disaster, although we do know that lesbians are a disaster as parents. No, this is true. Did you see that story about the lesbians driving their adopted kids off a cliff? Hardly surprising when people only become lesbians in the first place because they're psychologically damaged. But it's, there is significant evidence that lesbian parents are bad for children. You can look it up. I'm not just making it up to be funny. There's no corresponding evidence that gay men are especially bad parents, but notwithstanding any of that, I think a man and a woman who love each other in a long-term committed relationship are the best start for a child, all else being equal. If you deny the Catholic adoption agencies the right to make that obvious common sense determination, they have no option but to close. That, I think, is an abomination, and I think what the British government did was appalling. And so my participation in gay marriage is what it is, but I would not have done it were it not for the fact that we did it in America, where there is enshrined religious freedom. I wouldn't have got gay married in the UK or in Australia, where that freedom doesn't exist, and where gay marriage could be used as an excuse to compel religions to do what they don't want to do.
Thank you for that, and especially the honest little bit in there, inside. Okay, let me answer you the question that you raised, because I think we're running out of time. This is, of course...
I'm scared. Do I want to know?
Yes, you do. It's not a problem.
Okay.
As you know, and as you have spoken about it, our government, Mr. Orbán, has won by a landslide majority again this April. And
Uncle Victor.
Yes. Let's get used to that name.
Uncle Victor.
We call him Dr. Prime Minister, sir. Dr. Miniszterelnök úr.
Or just yeah, no.
But we could get used to Uncle Victor.
Yeah, Uncle. No, see, it's humanizing, and the thing that the left wants more than anything else is to turn conservatives and libertarians into monsters. They want to isolate and to separate, normal, right-thinking, regular people from the horrors of conservatism. The thing they hate more than anything else is when you humanize, people, when you make them relatable and even perhaps likable and lovable, which is, why I called Donald Trump Daddy, yeah. And why you should start calling your Prime Minister Uncle Victor.
Right, so there's Trump,
Nothing
Daddy,
will annoy them so much.
Daddy, Apuka, Trump, Uncle Victor, Viktor nagybácsi.
Again?
Viktor nagybácsi.
Viktor nagybácsi.
Okay, so after his landslide victory, the opposition press started this theme. They got on this bandwagon saying that it's the uneducated rural Hungary where the internet even does not exist. It is them who were brainwashed by the state media, by Orbán's policy of hatred.
They have no Twitter and Facebook. Lucky bastards.
Yeah. Well, I've been suspended for half a year, so I know what you're
congratulations.
Well, there's a couple more of us in the room.
I,
please,
of course, am patient zero of this phenomenon.
There you are, one. How many of us are suspended from Facebook? One. Well, there's like 10 people at least right now.
Well, they just haven't got round to the rest of you yet. You remember when Trump said, remember, what was it Trump said? I love low education voters, or something like that, because somebody was trying to suggest that not having a college education means that you're somehow not capable of casting a vote in a democracy. Well, hold up a second. People who study gender studies or race studies emerge from college less able to deal with the real world than when they started. They believe more untrue things than when they were in their teens. They are more emotionally and psychologically fragile than the average mental ward patient. They are utterly incapable of holding down jobs, relationships, and secure mental health. I would take somebody who lives in a trailer park over a gender studies graduate as a voter any day of the week. And it's funny, isn't it, the left who's constantly moaning about, oh, voter ID laws are racist, you know, you can't demand that people prove who they are, because otherwise the Democrats wouldn't be able to have all these dead people voting for them. It's funny, isn't it? Dead people always vote left-wing. The same people who are claiming that merely establishing your identity in order to participate in elections is somehow racist are the people who are perfectly happy to undermine the democratic mandate, undermine the central organizing principle of our democracy, which is one person, one vote, by subtly insinuating that some people are not really worth the votes they're casting because, you know, they didn't go to Harvard. And it's like, you know, well, if you don't go there, you don't know to read the New York Times and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you probably have it about right if you don't read the left-wing media, if you don't watch Hollywood movies, if you don't participate in what has become an extraordinarily politically homogenous higher education system. If you opt out of those things, you probably believe more things that are true. So I think that that's what Trump meant when he said, you know, we love, I can't remember exactly the words, we love our low education voters, or we love, or whatever. Me Too, and the I didn't mean that as a joke, but yeah, we'll talk about low education voters. Feminists, the people who know the least in society are often the people who are lording it over you, claiming they know the most. And the feminists and, you know, the left-wing loons and all the rest of it who seek to rule over the rest of you are often the absolute worst qualified people to run society and civilization. And as I said, I would take 100 white working class conservative voters over one gender studies graduate any day of the week. And saying that, by the way, oh, his voters are just dumb and ill-educated, I think what they're trying to say is he actually appeals to people. I think what they're trying to say is normal people with normal concerns who care about whether they can make rent, whether their daughter's going to get raped going out to a nightclub, those people are voting for this guy because they live in the communities where this rapid social change as a result of mass immigration or whatever it is, they live in the communities that are affected the most. So when I hear these snobbish, snooty elites saying, oh, well, all his voters are sort of very ill-educated, working class, whatever, it's like the uprising of the proletariat, what I understand them to mean is, oh, you mean people actually agree with him? You mean he actually connects with normal people who aren't like political nutcases and whatever. So I would take it as an enormous badge of pride to vote alongside people who work hard, who slave away for their families, who don't have the opportunities the rest of us have, who don't have the abilities the rest of us have, who don't have the, the same sort of, I know my life is luxurious and wonderful. But I also meet a lot of people whose lives are not. And to vote alongside them, I consider a great honor.
Well, what you just said very eloquently, and it's written right here on the shirt. I am one of those people. Je suis, like, the je suis Charlie. Mm-hmm. This is what it is. Je suis the rural bum. And we work,
it's like rednecks or something.
Kind of like that, absolutely.
Oh, I love rednecks. No.
Well, tell me. Me too.
So in Australia they're called bogan.
Bogans, yeah.
Bogans, yeah. So no, my last night of my last Australian tour, I came out on stage with a T-shirt that said "Bogan Pride."
Awesome.
Oh, well. Now I understand. I feel a little safer about about waking up tomorrow morning.
Not to worry. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so
it's been
much.
an honor.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Most of all, it's been a lot of fun too.
Thank you.
We learned a lot of things from you.
Thank you.
The most important of which I think is Uncle Victor. Let's
Uncle
get used to
Victor.
the taste of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.